Hello, I'm Dr. Bruce Teague from the Center of Entrepreneurship at Eastern Washington University, and this is Startup Stories, where we explore the entrepreneurial journeys of Spokane area entrepreneurs. On this episode, we will explore the importance of finding and understanding your customers early in the startup process. I'm joined today by Shaun Thompson Duffy, founder of The Grain Shed, located in the Perry District on Spokane's Lower South Hill. Shaun, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I would like to begin with a little bit about your background because it's kind of interesting. So before moving to Spokane, you were actually a chef in Michelin star restaurants. So can you talk a little bit about that experience and also maybe how it laid the groundwork for a bread business here in Spokane?
Sure. I'm from Texas. Born in Dallas, but I started cooking. I went to culinary school in Houston. Then after I graduated, I just started cooking in going to different cities, just to absorb knowledge. Went to Austin, went to Las Vegas, went to New York, just cooking in, trying to find different challenges and seeing what different chefs did. And then found my way to Chicago with my wife and cooking there, but then started getting into bread. I really started getting into bread because I would talk to these really highly acclaimed chefs about bread, and it was a mystery to them. And they tried to direct their questions elsewhere. Go talk to the pastry chef or go talk, so it was always go talk to the baker. And so it was a big mystery, bread, and it really sparked my knowledge. And there wasn't a lot of books, there wasn't a lot of literature on it. So I just dove in, and then my wife got transferred here to Spokane, and since I'm married to her, I had to come, and it's a blessing in disguise because it's great here, and it has a very rich bread culture, and the farmland, and it has a really rich grain culture as well.
So you moved to Spokane. Mm-hmm. You had been a chef in these Michelin star restaurants. You come to Spokane following your wife's business or work, and so now you're finding kind of what you're going to do here in the area. So you had developed an interest in breads. How was it that you came to decide that a bread business was needed here and that was the opportunity you wanted to pursue?
Sure. Well, whenever I came here, there wasn't much of a restaurant culture. So cooking in a restaurant wasn't, I wasn't going to get challenged much. So I was looking towards the next thing, and I was in Portland, and I worked at a bakery. It was a wood-fired bakery that also we milled our own grains. And I thought it was very different. But if you look at it, it's not different. It's just very old, and people don't do it anymore. So it's been done, but it's been done a long time ago. And whenever I came to Spokane, I saw a pretty barren landscape whenever it comes to bread. So I saw that was just a perfect opportunity. And also, we started having children, and doing a cutting-edge restaurant. It's very time-consuming, and it's not a very good quality of life whenever you have children. So not only I wanted to do something extremely different, and that's why milling your own grains, bread, and baking out of a wood-fired oven, bringing back wood-fired cookery and baking. It just all came to be.
So one of the unique things about your breads is you focus on ancient grains. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of that ingredient to the craft breads that you make and how your breads are a bit different?
Sure. We use ancient grains, but we also use what are called landrace grains. Now, there's only 3 different ancient grains, einkorn, emmer, and spelt. But then there's a vast majority of landrace grains. Some people call them heirloom grains. Some people call them heritage grains. We call them landrace grains. So coming from a chef's perspective, it's all about the ingredient. Now, it's really easy to make a really good quality pork taste good. It's really easy to make like really fresh, super quality produce taste good. But whenever it comes down to making flour taste good, usually a product that is lack of flavor, especially whenever you're in the commodity market. As a chef, I really wanted to find what makes flour taste good. And it all starts with the grain. If you're using a good quality grain, then you mill it into flour, you use it within a certain time period so it doesn't oxidize, and you have just an amazing ingredient. You're coaxing as much flavor out of flour, which is it was a big challenge, and I saw it as a big mystery. But now it's just like, how much flavor I can get out of it through fermentation, and it's fantastic.
And isn't there a different process that you go through in preparing your breads that is a slower process but has some benefits to the digestibility and flavor and things like that of the bread? Am I remembering correctly?
Absolutely, yeah. So the grains that it's like a 3-part process. So it comes down to the grain, the way we grow it, and whenever we mill the grain, so we have a big stone mill. Whenever we mill it, it turns it into flour, and we try to use that within a couple days, so it doesn't oxidize. Whenever oxidation occurs, it takes away a lot of the enzymes that are beneficial to digestion. And so freshly milled flour, that's also a landrace grain or an ancient grain. It's very soft. It has much more digestibility to it. That's a plus, but I was coming at it as a flavor standpoint. But then it's a highly digestible product, just the way bread used to be. It was way before there was all this gluten intolerance craze. I mean, that just didn't used to happen. But then we ferment it very slow. Basically, whenever water touches flour, it starts the fermentation process. We mix in a natural yeast and bacteria, and it just breaks everything down so your gut doesn't have to work overtime to absorb the minerals and nutrients. But it's not from a digestibility standpoint. It's from a flavor standpoint. Fermentation equals flavor. It's just the digestibility aspect is just a plus.
And you source your grains locally, right? You found them in this area. So can you tell us a little bit about how you found these grains for your breads?
So we grow most of them. We have a farm. My business partner is Don Sharman. He owns Palouse Heritage Farm. It's 35 acres down in right on the border of Endicott and St. John. So he grows most of the landrace grains that we use at the grain shed. We found him just through chance. I met my other business partner Joel at a bar. We started talking about all these weird grains that I liked, and then he just called me out of the blue and said some farmer called him up and said he has all these grains. And then we met at a beer festival, and then I was like, wow, this is incredible to come to Spokane and see all this all these grains that you have at your disposal. It's like an Indian chef who has all the spices at his disposal. I'm so surprised there's not more bakeries in Spokane, just because the Eastern Washington is so rich with grain culture, and you can really grow whatever you want here.
So this show is obviously about entrepreneurs and certainly for entrepreneurs. Spokane is a thriving entrepreneurial community right now. And I'm sure there's a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs who are watching. And one of the things we wanted to talk a little bit about today was the importance of finding and understanding your customer early on. And my recollection is that you have kind of an interesting startup story in terms of how you began finding your customers in this area and how that led to the start of your business. So can you talk a little bit about how you started the Grain Shed?
Sure. So whenever I moved here, I didn't know much about the city. Just what you read on Wikipedia. But then we saw that there was not a very big bread culture. So I was trying to figure out why that was. And since I baked bread, that's what I did. I was like, okay, I'll just start baking bread and see who would like some. So I just got done working in Portland. So I bought a wood burning oven, a smaller one than we have the shop. I had a mill as well, because those are the first two things: wood-fired oven and mill, and then you can attack a bread business.
And this was at home, right?
Yeah, I set it up in my backyard.
Okay.
And I just started baking bread, and I started a bread subscription to get the pulse. And it turns out that Spokane really wants good stuff. They'll pay for it, and they'll love it. And so I started a bread subscription. I started with 5 people, and that just spider-webbed out until it was 170 people coming to my house on a weekly basis getting bread. Some people would stay for drinks, dinner, and all that stuff. And so I almost, well, my wife said that this has to stop. So that's why I have a brick and mortar spot now. Like, we had to find a location for this because I essentially outgrew my home to do this. And it's needed in the community. It's needed to see the food culture grow in Spokane.
So I'm curious, as you were building the subscription bread model up, did you have anything that you tried along the way that you remember that just did not work out? That just was not a hit? Anything that you remember that way? Or?
There were some things, but the thing about the Pacific Northwest, especially Spokane, is people are very nice here. And they're not going to tell you that they don't like anything, especially to your face. Now, if this was in Chicago or New York, people would be like, oh, this is trash. But there's been some things that, I mean, I did a ton of experiments, and there were some things that I definitely wasn't satisfied. We have this grain called purple Egyptian barley, and I tried to make a bread out of it, and I tried my heart out because it sort of tastes like raisins whenever you do it properly. It just never worked out. The flavor was there, but the texture wasn't. It was like a spongy texture. It was really gross. Some people was like, oh yeah, I really loved it. But you know they didn't love it.
Now, is that what you use in your brownies?
Yes, that's what we use in our brownies.
Okay, because your brownies are like the best brownies I've ever tasted.
So if purple Egyptian barley has very few bread baking qualities, it can't really trap gas. But if you're chemically leavening something with baking powder or something like that, it works great.
So one of the things that I find most interesting about the Grain Shed is your business model. So you're a co-op business. Right. So can you talk a little bit about what it means to be a co-op business? And then if you could expand on that just a little bit to talk about your plan for growing the Grain Shed within the Spokane area, because I find it fascinating. Sure.
So we are a co-op. My business partner, Joel Williamson, he's started a couple of co-ops. He really believes in the co-op model. So what it is we, it's a group of like-minded people. That's where it starts. It starts with the like-minded individuals, and our mindset is all about the community. So we started looking for investors for the business, and we got investors because they didn't. I mean, it was one to invest in the business, but it's also one to invest in your community, and that's who we were really targeting. So once we secured them, we got to build everything out. But the coolest thing about being a co-op is that we're employee owned. We're an employee-owned co-op. So you have much more an investment from an employee standpoint. It's just not like a regular 9-to-5 job or just let me show up. They're really invested in it because they really, once you become an owner after a certain amount of time of working there, you really start to reap some benefits, which is really cool. And it's just not on me, or it's just not on my like Dawn or Joel to really like be the face of the shop. It's everybody, and everybody. We're just the founders, and we have employee owners and we have worker owners and all that stuff, which is really cool to see. It's a growth,
And in terms of the growth model for the Grain Shed, can you talk just a little bit about kind of where you see the future of the Grain Shed going? Because I find it fascinating how you're leveraging this co-op model forward.
Sure. So a big part of our model is we're trying to get farmland converted into away from growing conventionally into more of like an organic focused model. And so Don's really spearheading that. He's trying to find like-minded farmers to grow these grains, really rejuvenate that topsoil from soil erosion, which is a big problem in Eastern Washington. So once we have we have a lot of grains, and so what are we going to do? We need to expand. Wholesale bakery is a big part for us, just because our little shop, we have a wood-fired oven, and there's just only so much we can bake until the oven sort of drops. We don't have any knobs that we can just crank it up. So a wholesale bakery would be great just to get more bread out to people who can't really access it, just because we're in the Perry district. Growing the beer side, we have beers in cans now, but we're trying to find like a bigger place to start to brew beer, but also grain storage. I mean, like, we have all this grain. It's not like we can call up a distributor and they drop off a couple 100 pounds a week. We have like 2,000-pound totes where we need to store it after harvest. So finding warehouses for that is also a goal of ours as well.
Well, and my understanding is that you're still trying out new products at the Grain Shed all the time.
Oh,
So
yeah.
like you've got your pizza night and you've got a lot of different things that you keep adding in. And if I'm reading it right, it's become a place where other people who join the Grain Shed co-op can test out and find their customers and learn to understand them in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. So pizza night is great. Our chef Victor really does a great job with that. And then he has his own night too. Like he does he just got done with like an Indian night. So it's like these guys are owners now, and so they come to us with an idea, and we're like, yeah, let's build on this idea. So they have free reign as long as it makes sense and it's focused. We have a falafel night now on Friday. Toby is one of our employees who's almost working towards ownership, and he wanted to try out a falafel night. Yeah, sure, let's do it. As long as it's grain focused, we can use Pacific Northwest or regional grains and ingredients. We're all for it, and the community just loves it. We're right in the South Perry neighborhood, and it's all like neighborhood driven, which is really fantastic.
Well, it's a great startup story. You know I love your business. So thank you for sharing Grain Shed's startup story with us today. If you would like to experience the Grain Shed for yourself, I encourage you to go look for Shaun down at the Grain Shed in the Perry District on our Lower South Hill. Thank you for joining us on Startup Stories today. I'll see you again soon with another great startup story from Spokane.